when I'm walking down the street.
I do want to say to Donnie and many of you in this room that over a very long career in this city, all of you have helped me and my colleagues tell the truth and to try to tell.
I may not look like you and you me, but
my head up.
I'm from South Carolina, so I just
got it.
What does this event mean to you, Miss Peggy Morris?
Oh, my heart.
Happy 20th anniversary.
My heart is about loving up on my sisters. Do you know what it feels like to have your sisters in the room? John.
And dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. I am beautiful, I am blessed, but not just what you see in the flesh. I'm free from people, free from myself.
The doctor lived next door to the janitor, to the reverend, and the lawyer. We were together. Now we get so high and mighty that you create stress for your society because you don't like poor black folks either. That's a health problem. Get yourself together so I can stop being taking care of geriatric people and get back to pediatrics. I thank you, Donnie, for all you've done. Let's keep doing it all and more.
Letting His glory shine through. Dare to be you, dare to be me, dare to be different and unique. I'm gonna be the best me I can be by letting His glory shine through. And I dare you, I dare you, I dare you to be you.
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. A lot of things have happened today. Oh my goodness, we got to change that. But nonetheless, we're going to get straight to the giddy up. We have joining us with us today, Tharu Vignaraja. Good evening, sir.
Good to see you, sir.
Always a pleasure. Mike Haney, how are you?
Hey, Donnie, always good to see you. Hey, Tharu, how are you?
Great, Mike.
So today in front of City Hall, I don't know if you saw it, Mr. Haney. I think Mr. Vignaraja there was a hearing about the Baltimore gas and electric bill that went before the Board of Public Works. The comptroller, I think he got an abs. He was noted as abstaining, as was the city council president, and it hasn't really caused a groundswell in the community. Are you familiar with it, Mr. Haney?
You're talking about the conduit underground that the city voted on to either lease or sell to Exelon, i.e. BG&E?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on it?
Well, I agree with I agree with Bill Henry, man. I don't know why Baltimore City and the former mayor, Jack Young, said the same thing. Why would we sell to BG&E or Exelon, Constellation Energy, Calvin Butler, assets of the city for another organization to get rich? Sounds like a real sweetheart deal to me, Donnie.
Donnie,
Hey, Miss Jews, how are you? Looks like we lost Donnie, Miss Jews.
I just had to get a name correction. Yes, Tharu. And good evening, Marsha Jews. Tharu, your thoughts?
Look, I couldn't agree more. I mean, this is a really bad and unfortunate turn. You've got a mayor pushing through a deal that was not properly vetted, probably violates the charter amendment, doesn't have the support of the people. In fact, 77% of the city voted against selling our conduit away. And the only defense he has is, well, technically we still own it, even though BG&E controls what repairs happen, what renovations happen. They own it essentially in perpetuity, but in form, at least, we still own it. That's a terrible defense. And the fact that essentially, I mean, we've never seen this before. The council president and the comptroller literally didn't come to the Board of Estimates meeting in protest. That is unprecedented. And for you to still ram it through when you could have just delayed it by 2 weeks and had a conversation with the city council, it's you're showing who's boss, but what you're really doing is showcasing the dysfunction in City Hall.
Marsha, are you familiar with the press conference today in front of City Hall on BG&E? The mayor wants to sell the underground utilities. It was kind of
No, it was. Oh, I was involved in that. I was.
She's frozen out of there. I think we've frozen up. So through, do you think there should be more of a groundswell in the community?
You know, it's a complicated issue, so it's not as easy as crime or schools to talk about, but this matters. I mean, this is a major city asset. BG&E's been trying to buy this asset from the city for years. They offered $100 million to the city for it. We knew it was probably worth 10 times that. And so we took it out of the conversation, so you couldn't sell it off. I don't think the day-to-day conversation's ever going to revolve around conduits or infrastructure, but the future of broadband depends on this. The power of BG&E to hike up rates depends on this. Whether or not the good service goes to Guilford or Edmondson Village depends on this. You are basically giving BG&E the decision-making authority to say, oh, there's a service interruption in West Baltimore. There's also a service interruption in Federal Hill. Which one are we going to repair first? They now get to make that decision instead of Baltimore City. It's not easy to understand the impact of it on the everyday consumer, but it's going to impact it. And it's just irresponsible the way the mayor is approaching it. I think he's going to really look back and politically regret it, and he's going to regret it as a matter of policy.
Hey, Donnie, didn't the mayor come out last week and said the deal that he had in place was not really a purchase, but some sort of lease arrangement, which was kind of hidden? I mean, he's giving it away to him for a number of decades, but didn't he kind of offset what folks thought was a purchase to say that it was a lease instead? But it really is kind of convoluted there, as Daru said.
That's exactly right, Mike. And Donnie, can I just say one more thing? I mean, and sorry to be so legalistic about it. They found some clever lawyer to say, here's how we get around the restriction that says you can't sell it. What we do is we tell you that you're going to lease our house. We're not selling it to you, but we're giving it to you in perpetuity. You get to decide what renovations get to make. You get to decide who lives upstairs and who lives downstairs. You get to decide the color of the paint on the walls, but at least on paper, it's still ours. I don't think the people of Baltimore are going to fall for that. I don't think a court of law is going to fall for that. The fact that the mayor is willing to mortgage off this major city asset so he can get a couple more donations in, or whatever it is, save face, I think he's going to look back and regret it.
Marsha,
I always wonder why they dig the same holes 1,000 times. They dig in the same holes over and over again on that same conduit. And, you know, it's really crazy that we could be putting fiber down there so people could have free internet like they did in LaGrange, Georgia. That's a whole nother conversation. And I think it's really ridiculous that we would even put the corporations in the position where they were going to monetize all of this equipment that they're going to put in their coffers instead of the people of this city. And it's an outrage. And there should be a law that prohibits that. That conduit has other resources available to the citizens of this city that need to be taken advantage of, period, end. And yes, I said that. And every time we look around, somebody else is putting their corporation ahead of the city, and we're paying the taxes for all of this business. And nobody's dealing with what the citizens want to do. And so I think it's time now that we unite, because there are too many issues going on in this city, and affect some change with the leadership in this community. And it doesn't make sense to me. I can't find a place in my brain for this to fit.
Donnie, can I mention a name?
Sure.
I want to mention the name Calvin Butler, who has been a community resource, and either he's a very astute business person, because at the end of the day, there's a correlation between BGE, Exelon, Constellation, whatever, and he's now the head of that. And so, what civic responsibilities should he have? Or do we look at it as a good business decision by the corporation he heads now and taking advantage of the city and the city citizens of the city as Exelon is doing now? How do you feel about Calvin Butler now?
Well, you didn't catch me touting his name.
I,
We always
can I
proud to
respond?
see people of color rise to the top. But if the rise of people of color to the top only means further empowerment for the people who already have power, then what's the point? Did you really need a black person to do that, or a person of color?
But
Marsha, you were going to say something?
what I think here too is that just. I'm sorry. Can you hear me?
I was just going to suggest you speak.
Hello? Oh, I was going to say, I love talking, so that works for me. I think that it's really important, though, to look at this in the time frame that it's being done. Calvin's only been there 5 minutes. He's been in the corporation, but he's only been the CEO several months, maybe 6 months at that. This conversation where they're starting to talk about that conversation started long ago. They don't do that kind of short-term thinking. They do some long-range planning, and they put some real plans around that. And I'm not saying it to be defensive. That's just how corporations work. They're going to do their analysis and do whatever they need to do to get there. So I think it's a kind that they decided they want to put forward. And I think that now that he's been there maybe 2 months, he's now in charge of all, whatever, the good, bad, and ugly. So I think it's more about the corporation has made a decision, and up to the city citizens, that's what they want to do. And we put it on something where you have to vote on that.
Or Marsha, he could have got his deal because of that. Maybe he got his deal, like you said, it's been in the works forever. All of a sudden, this deal comes through, and maybe it was contingent on him getting that position, this deal, because it may set a precedent not only for Baltimore, but for other cities. Exelon is in Washington, D.C. as well as other major urban cities. And if Baltimore paves the way, maybe that's how Calvin got where he got, because this deal was in the works. And maybe that's the allegiance that Brandon owes, as Theroux said, in addition to other commitments,
I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's hard to blame a person whose business it is to make BG&E and Exelon successful and profitable. This is his job. He has cultivated these relationships over years. I don't think he's sitting there thinking it's going to hurt the people of Baltimore. In his mind, BG&E wants this asset. There aren't other cities where BG&E can exploit a weak city hall, a vulnerable mayor who wants a little extra cash, and all of a sudden you got this deal made. And just go back to Marsha's point, because I think this is really important. Imagine tomorrow that we wanted to have free citywide broadband internet for everyone. We could do that, right? We could use our conduit system. We could allocate a certain portion to fiber. We could get investors to support it. We could put money in ourselves, and we could do that as a city. After this contract is executed, we will no longer be able to do that. We got to go knock on Calvin Butler's door and say, Mr. Butler, could we ask for your permission to have internet be available to everyone in Baltimore? How ridiculous is it for a mayor to give away that municipal prerogative to a private party for an extra $6 million a year? I mean, this is a $3.5 billion budget. An extra $6 million a year doesn't pay for the traffic study that they're going to do next year. I mean, it's not real money from a perspective of an infrastructure, a once in a generation asset you just gave away for what it cost you, a fraction of the overtime you pay with the police every year. It's ridiculous.
So it just begs the question for me of why, who benefits? Is not the law firm associated with this transaction Venable?
The idea that this isn't connected to Jim Shea and Venable is hard to believe, right? I have a lot of respect for Mr. Shea. I have a lot of respect for for Ebony Thompson, the new city solicitor. But at the end of the day, what you have is a situation where a private corporation with very deep pockets and very impressive political connections has been able to hoodwink a city, a mayor, into giving away an asset and telling them, oh, don't worry, you still own it on paper. You can come visit anytime you want. But at the end of the day, if the decisions about renovations, repairs, investments, capital improvements are all now up to that private entity, it is only on paper that we still own it. For all practical purposes, BG&E does it. And there's two institutions that ultimately benefit. Number one is BG&E and all of the corporate interests it represents. And number two is the politicians who are funded by that corporation and their friends and their lawyers and their lawyers' friends. And so if you want to know why the mayor was willing to rush this through, right? This wasn't a 6-month study and a long conversation and a public town hall. This was on the books 2 weeks ago. And by the way, if the Baltimore Brew had not written an article about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, this could have slipped under the cover. Just goes to the Board of Estimates, you rubber stamp the deal, and it's done. It's just shameful that the mayor isn't taking it upon himself to protect the interest of the city.
You know, at the press conference today, there was the Baltimore City Comptroller, Bill Henry. There was the City Council President, Nick Mosby, Councilman Costello, Councilman Robert Stokes, and also former Mayor Bernard Jack Young. I found it interesting, those that came out. I did ask Bill Henry if he was running for mayor. He said that he could not answer that question. And I only say that because we're not that far from the next election. And with a decision like this BG&E and with those people seeming outraged, I just figure this could be a hot mayoral issue, Mike.
Hey, I agree with you, Donnie. It is. And, you know, moreover, with something of this nature, our Constitution should have the ability to remove and recall a politician. This is a classic example of how we could benefit from a recall measure within our Constitution. Because what he is doing is egregious and against the benefit of the people.
And we can do nothing about it, Marsha? There's nothing that can be done?
I think that there should probably be a group of citizens who have lawyers that we can go to court and put an injunction in place. I don't know, Thyru, you're an attorney, aren't you? And so you do some sort of injunction to prohibit the sale and to protect all of the pipe that's underground. And I'm going to go back to this underground because, you know, I see the same company digging the same hole at least 10 times. And every time I look around, it's a new subcontractor. It's the old contractor. It's a new contractor. They're all digging in the same holes. We need to take back those pipes and own them. They become the ownership, and they cannot be leased out unless there is a payment of usage. And they have usage like you get the BG&E bill. And people need to be able to, I'm going to go back to this free internet connection. And if you go to the Intelligent Community Forum, you will see cities around the world who are deploying internet connections, and they're using underground piping and above ground piping or above ground wiring in order for their citizens to have access. And so we cannot create a corporate environment to run the products that belong to the city and the citizens of it. It needs to be on an election ballot.
Carl, are you with us?
I'm here. Yes, sir. Hi, everyone. I'm here.
You didn't want to show your pretty face? You want to cut your camera on?
I think it's on. It's
okay.
On.
Okay. All right. Well, nonetheless, what's going on? What's going on with this Baltimore Gas and Electric? The mayor wanting to sell away our conduit utilities. I believe 741 miles or much of that.
That's ridiculous.
Very interesting. You guys have already said it probably. I'm just coming in. But, the mayor ran on a platform. One of his platforms was that he would get rid of his two designees, and the Board of Estimates would only be three members, elected officials, the mayor, the comptroller, and the president of the city council. It was his platform. He promised this is what he would do in his first year in office. Yet he's taken advantage of the fact that he has three votes, including two people who are not elected, and pushed this through. I don't understand it at all. I don't know if the deal is a good deal or not. I know you guys have probably discussed it, but I do know that the city council and the citizens of the city have said, let's talk about it. They didn't say we didn't want it. They didn't say it's a bad deal. They said, we want to talk about it for a couple of weeks and have some clarity on it. And I think everyone feels that this is being pushed through. And when you do something like this, people bring up the C word, corruption. And people are wondering, what is the payoff, payback? What is the backroom deal of it all? So it is a very, I don't understand the mayor, frankly, doing this. Given the fact that 2 more weeks, 3 more weeks, he still has the same 3 votes. He still has the ability to take this through, even over opposition. But in the meantime, he could really be moving toward transparency and getting the other 2 votes or not. So I don't understand this. And he's thumbing his nose at the city council, who is asked also to look at this.
Donnie, can I add?
Yes.
Can I add a couple points? I mean, you guys have made so many important, good points. So first, 2 political points. Carl is one of the few people that remembers so well that when this question was the subject of the mayoral debate, I was part of that election. Some of us said, we think the power to the mayor in the Board of Estimates is important because you can blame the mayor if you don't like the decisions. But Brandon Scott was one of the people that said, no, I'm going to reform the Board of Estimates. I'm going to give away some of my power. I'm going to make sure that I can't unilaterally control the decisions of the Board of Estimates. And here we are just a couple of years later where he has not made one step in that direction. And he has very quickly realized that having the unilateral authority to not have to convince anyone to make his decisions is preferable. And it's just too bad that he said one thing on the campaign trail and then did another when he got in office. Mike, your point about the recall thing, I'm not generally a fan of recalls because I say to yourself, you get an election every 4 years. However, this decision is going to encourage more people to run against the mayor than were thinking about it last week. I've heard attack Eric Costello, Bill Henry, Mary Washington, eviscerated him on the internet today. All of these people are now contemplating running for mayor when maybe not last week they weren't. And if that happens in a traditional election, if you got 20 people running against an incumbent, the incumbent might win. But a recall, to your point, puts the mayor's name on the ballot. And I think right now, 75% of the city is going to vote against him. He might win with 25% against a field of 20 people, but he doesn't have the support of the majority of the people. And I think a recall election in a circumstance like that is going to be interesting. Last couple points. Marsha, you asked about the legality of this and the way to challenge this. Look, Thiru Vignarajah has not been a lawyer in a minute, but there are so many obvious legal challenges. The fact that they got this passed without a quorum probably means the contract was not legitimate. The fact that you've got a contract that is an in perpetuity contract in practice, when there's a charter amendment that says you can't give this away, probably means it violates the substance and spirit of the thing. This is going to end up in a court. It's not going to end up decided by the Board of Estimates. And your last point, Marsha, was so important. If you want to make sure that BG&E does the work of the people, make sure that we have consistent flow of electricity, does not have service interruptions. One of the ways that you put their feet to the fire is you say, look, if you don't do this, your franchise fees are going to go up next year. If you don't do this, we're going to fine you. Well, we just gave away all of those options. BG&E now gets to do whatever they want. If they do a bad job, you can't even switch to another supplier. They have a monopoly in Baltimore City. They control 76% of that conduit already. You've just given away the ability to apply political pressure, financial pressure, impose fines, raise franchise fees, all those kinds of things. We just gave away the farm so that the mayor can score a political win. And I think it's going to end up being one of the biggest political mistakes of his tenure.
But how does this
So
benefit
can
the
I
mayor? How does
can
this
I
benefit the mayor? That's what I want to know. How does it? I mean, does he get that much more money into his campaign coffers, or will somebody at BG&E hire him after he's no longer mayor, or does he think that BG&E will give him enough money to run for whatever he wants to run for next? What is his payoff? Why is he doing this?
Well, first of all, Donnie, I think we're giving him credit for being smart. And that credit, I don't believe, is rightly placed. And part of the reason why people believe that he's a one-term mayor, because, hey, granted, let's call him a nice guy. Let's call him a guy that was great with constituent services when he worked for the office of the city council president, whatever. But when it comes to being mayor, he's over his head. He's over his head. So for him not to properly vet and to show bad politics on a decision like this goes to the theory that he is inexperienced and unprepared.
So is there a legal out to this? If there is something that happens with an election, is there a way to turn around or overturn this contract with BG&E?
Marsha, it's such a good question, because that is the biggest problem with you essentially giving away the farm. It's hard to get the farm back. Once you've sold it, right? Once you've given a contract to a private party, when we try to go take it back, you know what happens? BG&E goes into court and says, I'm sorry, we have a duly executed contract with the sovereign city of Baltimore, and we expect the courts to honor that contract. That contract says every 3 years, they can ask if we want to renegotiate. And if we don't, we get to keep the same terms as before. So, Your Honor, the city struck this deal. We gave them a little extra money, and we expect you to honor this contract. You could take it by eminent domain, right? You could walk in and say, we're taking it back that way. But that is very, very dangerous, because you're setting a the last time we did that was when we threatened to do it with the Baltimore Colts, and they literally in the middle of the night left. So threatening, saber rattling with eminent domain is a tricky thing, but that's the only thing I can think about. Mike gave the most polite insult I've ever heard of the mayor, saying that smart may not be a word that we should apply. I don't know, Donnie. I think there's two things that might be happening. One is the mayor thinks this is $100 million deal that I just did to BG&E for a dime on the dollar. Surely they're going to pay me back with thousands of dollars of campaign donations. Maybe they'll put some money in a PAC. But the other thing that I think is going on, and Mike, you hit upon it when you talked about inexperience. I think a lot of this is him just being stubborn. You know, he picked a fight. Everybody came out against him, and he needs to show that he's the mayor. He thinks, and his advisors are telling him, for him to surrender, for him to walk this back looks weak. And so I think this is as much about showing that he is the guy in charge, because he's a juvenile mayor right now, right? I mean, he thinks that the way you show strength is by never compromising. I was the same way in my mid-30s, so I can't blame him for that. But you grow out of that.
You weren't mayor. You weren't mayor in your mid-30s.
You're right.
He signed up for this.
Yeah, and there needs to be some sort of real leadership that's impactful. And for you're talking about all this is like huge, because those pipes are everywhere in this city. And so if we're looking at that, just that alone, and what we should be getting out of it, calls for almost a recall.
Carl Stokes, well, how does the recall work?
Well, we don't have a recall. So it doesn't work in Baltimore or Maryland. There's no recall. So it's off the table. It's not up for discussion. The only way we recall is to elect a different official at the next election, which would be next year.
I'm glad you said that, Mr. Stokes. Are you running?
I'm running as far as I can, Mr. Glover. You won't catch up with me. I'll be still running.
Rue, are you running?
Look, I can't rule it out, and decisions like this make it harder to pretend like the city is in good hands. If Carl will run, I will count myself out. But if he's not going to, then I got to at least think about it.
Well, Theroux, one thing that I'm very proud of you about is you're standing up for MBE. There was a company, and you brought to light the broader issue of minority business enterprises getting run over, forgotten. They say no man left behind. They left the whole damn black entourage of businesses behind in a majority black city. All I'm saying is, if we can get these businesses, however their finances or their capital or their infrastructure is, if we can get more of these businesses in position to hire more black people, that's that many more people you don't have to look at on the 6 o'clock news. That's my only point. It's just basic economics.
That's right. Donnie, by the way, you didn't ask Michael that question.
Okay, Mike, are you running for mayor?
Hey, I am running with Carl. So as Carl run away from the city, and I got to tell you, Donnie, what I am running for and towards is collaboration between candidates so that we get the best candidate. That when do we sit down as a people, including Theroux, including Carl, including Jack, including Sheila, including Bob, whoever, and say that in the best interest of the people of the city, this is the coalition that we're putting forward. Because that's what is discouraging. That, as you said, 20 people may run, and 20 people will get votes, and then the person that you're looking to move on, right? Not because they're not a nice guy, because they are doing a disservice to the city, unbeknownst to them, because they're inexperienced, and they get back in the seat by default. That's what's discouraging.
There's some other names that I've heard out there. Michael Moore. Michael Moore is a young man who actually popped Brandon in front of Reginald Lewis Museum. He was a campaign worker for Sheila Dixon. I think Brandon tried to ease by him, and next thing you know, he popped him. It was one of them quick ones. You'd have missed it. And then there's, I've heard Zed Smith's name out there, Theroux. Zed Smith, of course, associated with the Cordish family. And then there's Keenan Ellerby. Anybody know Keenan Ellerby?
I don't.
Well, I don't know what he's running for, but I heard that Keenan Ellerby, a.k.a. Conan, currently of 92Q, has interest in
Conan. Okay.
That would be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if we had been able to, if the mayor, when he came in with the city administrator that he fought to have, and a city administrator strong type government, and we were able to weaken it, because in Baltimore City, the mayor is king. You know, the mayor signed something. Sure. We're very strong in that mayoral seat. If we had a stronger city administration sort of government where the city administrator sort of ran operationally and the mayor was more, not necessarily a figurehead, but more weakened so that all the power doesn't lay within, I think we'd be better off as a city, and 1,000 people could run if they want to. But the real structure and ownership of this city, which is real estate and financial institutions, don't want that because they want the influence of that mayoral position, and that's what they have currently in the seat right now.
Mike, can I say one thing about this? I actually feel strongly about this topic. You know, we want to weaken the mayor when we don't like the mayor. But one of the advantages, one of the opportunities that I think Baltimore City has is that you have a strong mayor. You've got a mayor who, if you had the right person, if you had a person with vision and execution, I'm not just talking about Carl or me. I think that there are a lot of good people that could play that role. If you had that person, you could turn things around so quickly, in part because the power is consolidated in one person. They appoint the police commissioner, they control the board of estimates, they set the budget, they decide and appoint the members of the school board who appoint the CEO of schools. Every major function of Baltimore City is controlled ultimately by City Hall. There's a mayor in New York, LaGuardia, the airport's named after him. Mayor LaGuardia once said, if a pigeon dies in Central Park, it's my responsibility. The idea was that everything that happens in the city ultimately flowed up to the mayor. That is not how politicians in Baltimore City talk. If there's a crime problem, they blame the police commissioner or the state's attorney. If there's a schools problem, they blame the home or the principals or the CEO of schools. That's just not what leaders do. And in a place like Baltimore, where we do have consolidated power, if the streets are not clean, you blame the mayor. If the budget is not right, you blame the mayor. If the schools are not working, you blame the mayor. If crime is out of control, you blame the mayor. I think that is a real opportunity. And so I'm not ready to suggest that we have to dilute that power just because we don't like the person there. When you get a great turnaround CEO to come into a company, you give them the authority that they need to turn that company around. A lot of magic can happen when that occurs.
But Tharu, do you pay them $385,000?
So the last mayor, Dallas Andro,
Do you pay them $385,000, $350,000 a year without benchmarks? We hire a police commissioner, a school CEO at these incredibly high salaries.
Outrageous.
Without any benchmarks, without any incentives to do better. We just give it to them. I mean, who does? What kind of business savvy is that, Tharu?
You have a woman that gets nothing but zeros for the kids' grades.
There's a good argument that every one of those people should be removed and replaced with a different contract. You're 100% right. When a turnaround CEO comes in to a corporation that's failing, they don't fire 12,000 people, but they do fire all the people at the top. They bring in their own deputies. They identify the 150, 200 positions that are critical to the operation of that business. They find the good people and they strengthen and reinforce them. And they find the people that are hurting the company and they get rid of them. That is what you expect. And if you've got a mayor who is allowing a police commissioner to preside over 300 plus homicides for 5 years in a row, allowing the CEO of schools to preside over failing schools for now going on several decades, that's just a mayor who's not willing to take responsibility for it. This has become a mayor's bash fest. So I'm going to just sort of, leave it at this. The city is obviously not working. There's a lot of different places where it's not working. I'd love to talk about the minority business compliance deficits, because that is an example of something that's a little below the fold, right? People don't talk about it. It's messy, it's complicated, but it is so critical to understand where this money is going. I appreciate you giving me a pat on the back for doing that. But frankly, it shouldn't have been me, and it shouldn't be in 2023. This should have been 20 years ago. People should have been enforcing these rules. 2 years ago, when I was running for mayor, I talked about this, and I said to the people that were talking to me, I need an example. I need a clear-cut example that we can show to the public for why this money goes to these out-of-state prime contractors and it never trickles down. The system we have right now allows black subcontractors to compete for scraps on the table. That's all they're getting. They're not winning the contracts. They're not getting 50% of the deal. They're getting 5, 10, 15% of the deal, and they're not even getting that. We promise them scraps, and then we don't even get the scraps. And a city with a majority black city council, a black mayor, a black board, all of it doesn't seem...
It's outrageous. It's outrageous. And if I were white,
but it goes to the special interest money. When you politicize crime and you politicize education, okay, because we politicized crime, we politicized education, who cares about results? You know what I'm saying? From a political perspective. And when you talk about, as you mentioned, Theru, the MBE issues here in the city of a majority of, when you get special interest money, because you alluded to that with the mayor and the conduit, and you can allude to that with the city council races, you can allude to that to the politicization of all the positions that are elected, special interest runs the day. So is it financial institutions and real estate that really control the majority?
I think the reality is that we've allowed this to go on for far too long, and people are comfortable with it. And so until we make a decision as the citizens of this city that we want some real leadership here, then we can have a different conversation. But you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you're going to get the same results, because this isn't new.
Let me just throw this
But what
out
does
there.
real leadership look like, Marsha? I mean, what does it look like?
Well,
Since
it doesn't look-
D'Alessandro,
Mike,
ahead.
let me just throw this out there about MBE. Did you know that Herman Taylor is leading MBE Annapolis.com? I didn't know this until last minute, but there's an event down in Annapolis at a hotel. I think it holds about 300 people, by former delegate Herman Taylor, who happened to be a Peter Franchot supporter. And they are having an event, their annual MBE night. The very first one, Theru, this was going back to the O'Malley administration around 06, had well over 1,500 people at the House of Delegates in Annapolis. The building was packed. I believe it was the House. It was just packed. But they have this little small event by this guy who supported Franchot, who lost, who's now heading up this little private. Did you know about this, Michael Haney?
no, I didn't.
It's kind of like, well, what about the rest of us? We see this guy over here sucking up to try to make up for being over there with the loser team, but what about the rest of us? So I've sent word to Annapolis, and I hope they get that together. But Marsha, you wanted to talk about education, and big ups to Michelle Howard. Michelle Howard is a LinkedIn star. This lady right here has helped people here at the state of Maryland with MDOT. She's now over at WMATA in Washington, D.C. And Michelle Howard, your best friend Wayne Frazier, I'm just joking, he said that you've got 3,500 hits on his page. So there you go, Marsha Jews.
She's
you
doing
education.
wonderful work. You're doing wonderful work. Well, I guess I came on with the idea that we were going to talk about our school system and the fact that these children aren't learning a daggone thing. And it's abysmal what's going on in this system. And I don't know why somebody's making $385,000 a year and the children can't read. They don't have access to equipment and internet. They don't have heat in half of the buildings. I mean, I don't understand how this is still going on. Carl, you got something to say?
Well, first of all, school leadership doesn't believe in Black children, and they don't believe in poor children. They don't believe in them. First of all, they think it's like the squeegees. And I said to someone, the kids shouldn't be squeegeeing. And someone who supports the squeegee kids said, well, at least they're not selling drugs, as if that's the only two options that poor Black kids have: squeegeeing or selling drugs. The expectation and the vision for these children, Black, poor, actually they could be brown or white, poor, people only believe they can do so much, that their IQ is limited, that their intelligence is limited, and that's what's happening in the schools. Now, when you have 23 schools where nobody gets proficient, I've never heard a zero number in my 7 decades of living. I've never heard a zero proficiency.
Right.
But the school board can do what it chooses to do at North Avenue. And they don't, because they're part of, boy, I hate saying this, they're part of the Black intelligentsia in Baltimore, whatever the hell that means. Because they think they're so smart that only their kids can be in private or the best public or parochial schools, while every other kid must suffer in a less than learning environment in Baltimore City. And so I'm saying that the people at North Avenue, for the most part, beginning with leadership, they don't care about the children, and they certainly don't believe in their ability to be great.
And don't
And they
want them to
are,
be.
well, I know this from personal experience, and I won't go through my experience, but everything they said to us that we couldn't do because they blamed the parents, they blamed the home, they blamed the neighborhood, they blamed mental health. And in 2 years, we ran a school that was in the 85th percentile of the city schools. And we didn't evaluate, they evaluated us, and we were in the 85th percentile. Now there's a school who got a reprieve last night. They've won a battle, but they haven't won the war because they are going to be scrutinized for everything for the next 3 years. And they're going to be lied upon. Let me just summarize that North Avenue gets away with not educating children,
Right.
and they have no accountability. None.
Right.
Nobody
Right.
says you have told, and you can get principals and others to talk to you. They will talk on the record.
And tell the truth.
They have students who are not on the books, and North Avenue tells them to keep the people on the books. They have students who are not prepared to move on to the next grade, and they're told, meaning the individual schools are told by North Avenue to move the students to the next grade. They are, look, there's so much going on. They're receiving a diploma that's not worth, it's worth less than the paper, than the paper that it's printed on. And so we're speaking about the wealth gap. These young people who come out of school at 18, 19 years old, they're not going to make up the wealth gap. They're going to widen the wealth gap because they don't have the skill or the ability. And by the way, folk keep saying that children are different. It's not the children. It's not the children. These children are just as smart. They have the ability.
Down in the street.
They have the ability. It is directly the school and the school headquarters and Baltimore's elected officials who keep their mouths closed. Look, I'm going to say the C word again: corruption.
Mm-hmm.
There,
You know, my daughter decided, she said, yeah, we're not doing this. And my grandson is being homeschooled. You know, you cannot expect your child to learn something if the people who are in leadership do not care. If the people in leadership are not providing the infrastructure, if the people in leadership don't provide the teachers to the opportunity to teach, if the leadership doesn't give you what you need in order for you to grow, for you to understand, for you to have all the resources that you need to be the best student you can be. You can't be a leader if you don't have your parents involved and the community involved, so that children are actually able to learn that there is peace within the community for them to be able to go to a school that has the people who want to be supportive. But I can't even imagine what some of these teachers are feeling. You know, I've worked in a corporation where there was poor leadership, and that trickles down to the employees. If the employees are not being supported, if the employees are not given the tools to do what they need to do, if we're sitting here saying that we need books and we need computers, we need whatever we need, and the children don't have them, those schools are abysmal. Those teachers are just finished. They are tired. That is a psychological, they're destroying the psychological and emotional being of these teachers who don't get what they need in order to be the proper teachers. They don't have the leadership. And we can't put it on the teachers. You have to put it on the people making $385,000 a year. You have to look at the schools that are doing the best, like Carl's School, the schools that they do have that are successful, and create the the model is already there. All you have to do is distribute it. You need to there's no leadership in education in this city, and all of those people making $380,000 a year doing nothing. And you mean to tell me that these children are walking away with the grades that are are similar to a zero? Because they're not getting any information. They're not able to pass because they don't have the tools. And it's
Well,
outrageous.
Marsha,
And they look
you
like
have a
us.
point. We know, Marsha, you have a point. But how do we fix? What do the fixes look like? Because we have
Fire
a
everybody and bring some people who are competent and
hear me
capable.
out. Hear me out for a second. Because it's multi-dynamic in terms of the issue, okay, of learning in an urban environment where you have 64% of the students that are able to graduate out of Baltimore City Public Schools, and those only have a fourth grade reading level. So what are we doing to our city in a decade or 2 decades? Because these are the citizens of our city that have the 1.8 reading level or the 4.8 reading level and aren't graduating from high school. So it's multi-dynamic. There's no doubt in my mind that the CEO in Baltimore City needs to be changed out. But as we change out the CEO and the structure of leadership there, what are some of the other accountability factors? Because I know in my home, as in your home, you mentioned your daughter, homeschooling, which is a trend now around the country. Homeschooling is a trend, particularly in urban environments, right? Is that what's the accountability factor of families? My sons and daughters are going to read regardless of what happens at school. It's just not going to happen where my sons and daughter are not going to be able to read a newspaper. And so there's accountability on 2 sides that need to happen. Accountability, as you mentioned, with the politicians and the people towards leadership, and there's accountability in the homes as well. Carl Stokes, who I'm intimately familiar with, his advocacy in Baltimore City Public Schools was held to a higher standard as a charter school than we hold our own public schools, and we can look at the Baltimore Boys Collegiate Academy as the consummate example of that now because of the money. It's all about the money.
So,
Right.
so let me say a couple of things on the subject of education in Baltimore City right now. There is no vision, there is no roadmap, and there is no execution. And the thread that weaves through all the points you guys have made is the culture of low expectations in Baltimore City with respect to our children and our Black children in particular. When we say it's better that they're out there on corners begging for dollars for squeegee work instead of selling drugs, we are reinforcing that culture of low expectations. When we say it's better to advance them from 3rd grade to 4th grade, 4th grade to 5th grade, and so on and so forth, so they get a diploma, even though they don't know how to read, write, or do math, that is reinforcing the culture of low expectations. When the mayor is asked, what about 23 schools where no kids can do math? And what about the fact that we are last in the state when it comes to these tests? And his answer is, that's not a surprise. That's what we expected. Those are not my words. Those are the mayor's words, that he expected to be in last place. When you say that out loud, you are reinforcing the culture of low expectations. And when we hear examples like Carl's School, like Baltimore Collegiate, which are literally doing the impossible, right? If you're a rich parent in Baltimore, you have the option of single-sex education for your son. You can send him to Gilman, Boys Latin. There's a whole list of private schools that if you can afford them and you believe that your child, your son would benefit from an all-boys education, you have that option. But if you are too poor to afford those schools and your kid doesn't play football at a level that Gilman will recruit him, You have zero options, none. The only options that existed were Carl's school and now Baltimore Collegiate. So to your point, Mike, if we have created, God bless Carl, God bless the people that are doing it, if we've created a public alternative for single-sex education for the parents and families that can't afford Gilman or Boys Latin or Mount St. Joe or Loyola, then surely do what you got to do to make sure those schools stay in effect. I don't want you to lower the standards. I just told you I don't want to lower the standards. I want you to help them succeed. I want you to make sure that they are the schools that are prospering and are functional. And if Carl needs a little help, send him some help. If Baltimore Collegiate needs a little help, send him some help. But the option of shuttering the only all boys public option in Baltimore City is not an option at all, unless you want to surrender to this culture of low expectations.
And it's on a technicality, Theru. You know, Theru, when we were in Marsha and Donnie and Carl, in my estimation, closed for what it is today was after we closed Bethlehem Steel and Sparrows Point. So all of a sudden, the options of going to an industrial workforce, and we transitioned when they closed into a workforce that was hospitalization, financial, tourism, and we demanded soft and social skills and reading skills of our people. We struggled ever since, man, to a point now where it is wide open, and we see the atrocities of not focusing on education 3 decades ago. We don't have a money issue. We don't have a money issue. We have a greed issue and a corruption issue and a misplaced issue and a family structure issue, I believe, as well, because the families have got to ensure certain things are priorities inside of their homes before they send their kids to school.
Question to Carl, question to Theru. Is it that charter schools are anti-Democrat? Is it that charter schools are anti-Baltimore City public schools? What is this historic disdain of charter schools?
No, it is not anti. We took every student, all charter schools, take every student. If there's 125 spaces and 150 or 200 kids that want to get in, we put all names into a rotating barrel, and we picked the first 125 names out. And those kids, regardless of whether they are greatly in need of special education, greatly in need of physical a disability help, whatever they need, or whether or not they're the smartest kid in the block, those kids come out randomly, and we take all students into the school. And so it is not anti-democratic. It's not elitist at all. There are schools in Baltimore City that are traditional schools that are elitist. You know this. You know what schools are elitist. You know what schools cherry pick, so to speak. But the charters do not cherry pick by law.
Hey, to your point, Donnie, do you know the jurisdictions that had the highest number of charter schools in the state of Maryland? Do you know the jurisdictions? The 2 jurisdictions, let me tell you, Prince George's County and Baltimore City. Baltimore City has 33 charter schools. To the contrary, Howard County has none. Okay? Montgomery County, which has, they say, one of the best school system, has maybe 1 or 2. Baltimore City has 31 charter schools, which were brought in to augment the atrocious job of education that public schools were doing. And the biggest travesty they made was putting that entity in charge of these charter schools.
If you had great public schools, perhaps charter schools would not be needed. But some historical context is needed here. My mom and dad were both Baltimore City school teachers. They're retired now. My mom taught at Poly. My dad taught at Edmondson and Douglas. They were part of the teachers union. And in every other state in America, there is a problem because charter schools and teachers unions are pitted against one another, okay? Because charter schools insist that they want to be able to hire their own teachers. So they piss off the teachers union, and the teachers union resists charter schools. Baltimore and the state of Maryland has an opportunity to be a pioneer here, because we struck a compromise years ago that said we will have a more generous approach towards charter schools, and in exchange, charter schools will agree that they have to hire union teachers. So that tension, which explains why so many people were against charter schools, that tension doesn't exist here. And if you look at the small number of jurisdictions in this country that have gone from having atrocious schools to having pretty good schools quickly, right? There are systems that improve over 40 years, but the school systems that have improved very quickly, Washington, D.C., New Orleans, are jurisdictions where they heavily relied on charter schools because you have specific mandate oversight over those charter schools. You can go in and say, show me the grades, show me the performance, show me how you're spending your money. And that kind of accountability right now does not exist at Edmondson High School or Frederick Douglass High School or it just doesn't exist. It does exist at City Springs. It does exist at Hampstead Hill. Those charter schools, which have to go through renewal processes every 3 years, their feet are to the fire. So it's not that charter schools are necessarily better or worse, but if you look at the places that have improved things quickly, they relied on charter schools. And if we don't acknowledge that they're a part of the solution, we are going to be stuck in neutral for the next 40 years.
You're muted. You're muted.
Marsha?
You're muted.
Thank you. I don't understand. So I moved here from Montgomery County in Bethesda, and my daughter's elementary school was amazing. Just everything was available. Just everything was available. And it was the joy from the teachers and the administration was for the children to learn and to expose and to love on those children and to encourage the children.
Now, why'd you come back to Baltimore?
Well, no, I was not in Baltimore first. I moved from Bethesda to Baltimore.
Why?
Because I married somebody and moved, anyway, that's all. Yeah. So the real issue here, though, is that we need to be able to look at a public school system that we pay our taxes for every year, that we have this expectation that somebody making $385,000 a year has the love and commitment to educate and empower our children to be the best they can be, to create an environment where they're supposed to enjoy learning and being able with this education to see themselves be the best that they can be. Why are we having a conversation about our children out in the middle of the street trying to clean off some doggone windshields during school time? Why are we sitting here because they go to school that doesn't have anything for them? They're not learning anything. And the people who are administrating the quote unquote dictating what they're supposed to be doing, they're not doing because they're not committed to their job. The teachers aren't happy because of the problems they're going through with an administration that doesn't give a daggone. And so here our children are sitting there because the teacher's sitting there complaining because they have to go through the foolishness. Then we have a community that people are unemployed or they don't have enough money coming in to take care of themselves, to be able to pay their bills. So now you've got issues at the home level. I used to work on a program and this, I'll remember this experience for the rest of my life. And it is painful. And this was 1990 something. And I was on the executive director for Alvin Ailey Dance Theater Foundation of Maryland. And during the summer, we had a program with these kids. Now, that was 20-something years ago, right? Those kids had an experience with that program that taught them something. However, when they left the program in the evening, and they were at Morgan during the summer, and then in the fall, they were at UMBC. In the fall, I'm going out to UMBC, and they're kids that don't have a way home. I drive this little girl home. The little girl lives in one of the alley streets in West Baltimore. At the bottom of her door, there's, you know how the little things, indentures, was missing. A whole animal, a whole person could crawl under that. The girl goes inside, she opens the door, but the light never comes on. I'm still sitting in my car in the alley. And the lights come on. I get out of my car and I'm looking around. I don't know what the heck I'm going to have to make it do. I knock on the door and I said, baby, turn the light on. She said, the light's not working. It's dark. The mama's not home. Nobody's home. And there's a hole that a human being can crawl in. That's one experience that will be with me forever. The second one is a brother sitting in the gym at UMBC, and kids are playing basketball. They got little things. Fidelma Ashley was a camp leader, and she was giving them things to do. And this little boy was sitting on the bleacher thing, and he was detached. He wasn't involved. And I walked over and I said, baby, why are you sitting down? Why don't you go do something? Don't you play the guy? He said, Miss Marsha, you always trying to make people happy and laugh and stuff. Ain't nothing to be happy about. I said, but this is a good experience. And, I'm being a cheerleader. And he looked at me. And he said to me, I don't see me living past 15. So that's what a home looks like. That's what homes look like. And they haven't changed much since the 1990s to 2023. So we have children who are dealing with the most abysmal environments. And then we have teachers who could give less than a daggone because they're going through their own problems. And then you have this fake ass leadership that's supposed to be creating an environment where our children can learn, where our children can get excited, where our children can see themselves being the best that they can be. And we allow that?
Well, Marsha, you're absolutely right. I'm listening to you. And when you're on the ground, you see this, you see examples of what you're saying every day. And as I said earlier at the top, it's multi-dynamic. When you look at the crime and you look at the other issues, MBE, et cetera, in this city of Baltimore, they're all intertwined. When you have socioeconomic issues at home, as you gave example of, how can a parent get behind and be held accountable for a child going to school when they're just trying to keep the lights on? You know what I'm saying? You're absolutely right. We don't have a community advocate at the top of policing. We don't have a community advocate at the top of education. And what does community advocacy look like? Where you figure out what we need to do so that people can at least have the basics of living in order to move forward. Superintendent Williams out in Baltimore County, because we have a regional issue. Baltimore County, Baltimore City, it's synonymous with bad education. Says that the biggest issue he has is discipline in the classroom, where 33% of the students were suspended or expelled, led the state in suspensions and expulsions, right? In Baltimore County. So as we talk about Baltimore City, we talk about Baltimore County. Is there a difference? Is there a correlation? As Donnie always talks about that Liberty Road corridor and us thinking suburbanly that that's of benefit and value to us as a people.
Donnie, can I give one closing thought?
So I just wanted to pose one quick question. Is it time for a Republican mayor in the city of Baltimore? It's corrupt, and I think it's corrupt because it's 9-1 Democratic city and there's no accountability. Nobody says anything about Santa Lisa. Nobody says anything about Harrison. I live 2 blocks from where the young lady, 23-year-old, was killed on Lawrence Street. She ran into the pole with the 2 children, and they have police out there, but people sell dope, coke, and crack right in front of these police all day, every day. It's the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. Is it time, Marsha Jews, for a Republican mayor in Baltimore?
I think it's time for a mayor that gives a damn. And I don't care if it's Republican, if it's independent, or if it's whatever. I don't care. I can't cuss.
Okay.
The politics don't have nothing to do with nothing. Right now, we need to have people.
Do everything.
But I'm saying right now, with this Democratic group, it doesn't work. So I don't care. Is it independent? Is it Republican? Is it some other kind of whatever? It's about that person that's in there and who that person is and what that spirit is. We need somebody who is rational.
Just a
it's
short
time
answer.
to get rid of this.
Okay, Michael Haney. Is it time
Hey,
for
so Donnie, what are we really asking in that question? Are the people of Baltimore that aren't educated in formal setting of a Baltimore City public school, aren't educated politically, it's not a reality. Do we need a structure and a discipline similar to that political party? Yes. And what does a conservative look like in City Hall? From whatever persuasion. But it's not a reality in Baltimore City because we're not politically astute enough to look at issues and align it to personalities to elect someone different than what we'll be getting. That's why we'll continue to get what we're getting until we get educated people politically and formally.
I've met great leaders that are Democrats. I've met great leaders that are Republican. I was a big supporter of Larry Hogan. I'm a big supporter of Rashawn Baker. I don't think that leadership has a political party, but that is what you need. And if I had to give a couple of very specific things that we should be looking for, I'll flag 3. Number 1, you need someone who has the luxury of not being beholden to special interests, who has the luxury of not needing BG&E or some big developer or a job when they leave office. That's the first thing you need. Second thing you need is someone who genuinely wants this job. They don't want to be governor. They don't want to be senator. They don't want they want to actually solve the problems of Baltimore. And number 3, you need someone who is willing to say and do the things that need to be said and done, even when they are not popular. And look, Donnie, you and I have talked about this. I've pissed off a lot of people, but I haven't done it because I was trying to butter the bread of one of my donors. I haven't done it because I needed a job afterwards. I've done it because those are the causes that I think would actually make Baltimore better. And I'm not unique in this respect. There are other people that I think are prepared and are poised to speak truth to power, but it does not happen. And maybe my closing remark will be this, because the only thing more tragic than what Marsha shared with us is perhaps that the one thing that could save those kids, the girl who crawled into that house, that boy who said, I don't expect to live past 15, is schools and leaders. The one thing that might get them out of that. And we have to be forthright about what we're talking about. I did a book project called Breaking the Promise of Brown. It was with Justice Breyer. And the worst kept secret in America, the worst kept secret in Baltimore, is that our schools are more segregated today than they were at any point since 1968.
Wow.
The schools in Montgomery County, the schools in Howard County, they have Black kids and white kids. Not so in Baltimore City. The overwhelming majority of our elementary schools, middle schools, and all but 2 or 3 high schools are 98, 99, 100% Black. And I promise you, if the Howard County executive or the Montgomery County executive was ever asked, you have 23 schools where nobody can pass the math comprehension test, what do you say? He would be ousted tomorrow. If the answer was, that's what we expected.
Right.
That's
It's
what we
outrageous.
expected. It's
They need to go to
outrageous.
jail.
And what we have said is that because our schools just deal with black kids, we should go ahead and accept that dead last is where we're going to be.
But you're talking about black people who are doing this. So the black people are the ones who are doing this to the black children. So let's deal with that psychology and the madness that that represents. There is something fundamentally wrong with you that you can't even see that.
Marsha, you
But
and
that's
I
where, as
know,
we talked about, that's where, as we talked about, the astuteness and education of us as a people that goes into the families and the homes and puts economic prosperity on the table as a reality. And we talk about minimum wage being $15. Who wants that minimum when it takes $68,000 to really put a family of four just at the below threshold of the middle class, right? 68,000. But we're talking about a $15 an hour minimum wage. So we have to be re-educated in a multitude of ways, particularly in these urban cities and urban centers like Prince George's County, Baltimore City, that have a lot of synergies educationally and politically and crime-wise, as many urban centers do. It's not just in Baltimore.
Frederick Douglass said that when we find a man who has ascended heights beyond ourselves, who has a broader range of vision than we, a sky with more stars in it than we have in ours, we may know that he has worked harder, better, more wiser than we. He was awake while we slept, busy while we were idle. He was wisely improving his talents while we were wasting ours. Marsha Jews, Tharu Vignaraja, Mike Haney, we want to thank you for joining us this evening. See, Tharu, I told you it was going to be a great time.
I enjoyed it more than you know. Amen to what you just said.
Amen.
Thank you.
Until next time, good evening.
God bless.